After today's video, I believe there should be legislation to ban assault pens. Hi everyone, welcome to today's bonus badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I'm your host, John Correa.
I'm your co-host, Mike Willower. Today's video comes to us from Houston with slot machines, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Also strippers. Well, there might be strippers in Houston.
Oh, for
I'm
sure.
sure there are.
The Storm Hunter WX weather app is free to download and use and provides you with warning of severe weather even before the National Weather Services issue alerts. This advanced weather app is an important tool for awareness of severe weather that I use every day. Download and use it totally free without in-app purchases on iOS or Android at the link below. What we're looking at here is a couple of guys kind of having a fist fight in the street. They are right across the street from like a homeless halfway house that during the pandemic, if homeless people went to the hospital with COVID, they were then released rather than right back to the street to one of these halfway houses while they continued to recover. The cameras that we're looking at, they're security cameras from a Catholic charity that is across the street from that has security cameras all around it. So this is what's happening. These guys are having a fist fight. A couple of guys who were living at that halfway house apparently are right in the neighborhood who are known to have mental issues and known to have significant mental illness. So they're having a bit of a fight. Somebody honks at them, so they kind of walk off. Now what you're going to see is a court officer who's a supervisor show up in an unmarked police car and jump out and decide he wants to talk to these guys and he wants them to come and talk to him and maybe effect an arrest on him. So you see the officer who is in uniform. Again, he is a supervisor of the courthouse that is in this neighborhood in an unmarked car. So he pulls the second guy who started running, and the guy starts slashing at him with an implement in his hand that they call in later, that they were calling it in as a shank and a knife and those things. Turns out it was actually a ballpoint pen, believe it or not, but kind of hard to see in the moment. So you saw the officer here draw his baton. That's going to make the guy kind of walk off a little bit. So the officer decides, no, I got to keep chasing this guy. Well, that's going to piss him off. He's going to come running back at our officer here in just a second. Officer's going to continue to back up and not want to get close to this guy. Now, if you remember, the officer jumped out of his car and left his door open. You can see it right there on the left-hand side. So that what's going to go down now is this guy's going to start running the officer's way and then make a turn here like he's going to go for the cruiser, which is going to make the officer kind of change. He's going to chase him down. The officer shoots him once in the leg right there. And when he shot him in the leg, that was enough to make the guy lay down and regret his life choices. It wasn't a fatal injury. The guy did survive his injuries. The officer was only mildly injured from the fall that he took. Our dude is being charged with assault on a protective person, and he was actually removed from his first court hearing for making obscene gestures and disturbing the courtroom and all that stuff. So he's a piece of work, and we're going to think about lessons.
Hey, if you want to talk about the legal and moral side of self-defense, come over to our second channel, Active Self-Protection Extra. Hit the subscribe button. Every Friday, we talk about legal and moral self-defense on John's Briefs.
Mike, you got a lot of experience in law enforcement, and I just want to ask a question at the beginning here. We see our officer kind of rolling up, and as these guys are having a bit of a fight, he decides he's going to get involved. But this isn't his beat. He's not out on patrol. He's in an unmarked car. Did he need to get involved here? Was this a smart decision? Was it the right decision?
You know, the way they stopped doing what they were doing and started walking down the street like everything was cool leads me to believe that maybe this officer from a half a block away saw what was happening, hit his siren maybe. We don't have sounds. We don't know that. As far as getting involved goes, this for me, this is a, hey, I'm going to call some on-duty units to come handle this because I don't know if he was able to call out and say where he was or what he had on his hands, but this could, turn badly quickly. It's kind of like in a domestic dispute where you show up to people who are fighting each other now want to fight you. And if both of these guys had decided to fight him at the same time, he might have a real problem on his hands. Now, the other possibility here, John, and we don't know, is that one of these guys, the guy in the blue, perhaps had a warrant, and this officer, maybe he's a sheriff's deputy, I'm not sure, maybe he knew that and was trying to get him into custody. I don't know, but I don't like getting involved in this as quickly as he did. I prefer to call on-duty units, but that's just me.
And again, I don't think it's wrong. He has the authority to do this, but maybe at some point go, I'm going to let the other guys who's at their job deal with that, call them in and deal with it. Because, again, as an admin supervisor in court, he hasn't done this kind of stuff and had to go hands-on with guys in a bit. Tough stuff to do, especially with two of them. So now you see as he approaches this guy, that guy comes after him, and we do find out now, again, that people said that he had a shank on him, and that's what the people described it as, but it ended up being a ballpoint pen. Still, somebody can take your eye out with a ballpoint pen in a pretty big hurry with a stab, and now you've got an angry, mentally disturbed man who you're going hands-on with and has decided to attack you, this has got dangerous fast.
Yeah, and like I said before, I don't know what happened to the other guy, but God forbid, you see later in the tape, there's a point where he is out in the road. There's other people who I assume are almost certainly other homeless people with God knows what mental state that they're in, that are coming up to maybe help the officer or maybe help the bad guy. We don't know. Like I said before, I don't like him jumping out on this alone under these circumstances. That's why the on-duty units are on duty. You can make a U-turn and follow these guys down the street from a distance and call in the cavalry instead of trying to go hands-on yourself. Because like you said, God knows the last time this guy went hands-on with anybody, and it potentially could have ended very, very poorly.
Now, he decides that the tool of choice for him in this case, you saw the motion he made, was the baton. Now, if that guy has a gun, a baton is a terrible idea. I also think, Mike, that if he thinks this guy has a knife, a shank, a shiv, something like that, I don't want to fight a guy if I don't have to, who has that kind of implement with a baton. Now that said, it can be very effective if you know how to use it, but you better be trained in how to use it.
Tough to say here, John. Maybe he saw that it wasn't an edged weapon. Maybe he knew at this point, oh, it's just a ballpoint pen. I can't shoot him. Because he's wielding a bic. So perhaps he saw that, and that's why he went with a baton. That would make more sense. I don't know if he has a taser or pepper spray, but the baton's a very underutilized force multiplier that I found extremely useful when I was on duty. Tough to say here what he was seeing or what he thought, but if he still thought this was an edged weapon, I think the baton is inappropriate at this point. I think it's time to go to deadly force, because we don't, as law enforcement, we don't try to match force for force. We have to stay one step above whoever it is that we're fighting with. In this case, if he legitimately thought that was a ballpoint pen, that would make more sense to me anyways, to why he decided to go for the baton instead of a gun.
Now, I will say this, that recognize that a baton, if used appropriately, is less lethal force. But if you hit a guy's hand with that baton, you're going to break his hand, and probably need to break it if you think he's got something in it. And if you hit him in the head, it could very easily put him in the hospital. So I think the baton is a very useful tool and an underutilized tool today in law enforcement, but it is a limited tool, and you must know its limitations and how to use it appropriately if you're going to employ it. Now, I do think this officer did a good job of using it to gain a little bit of space. He had some space. Then as soon as he gets a tool out, the guy's like, oh, I have a distance disadvantage now. And that gave our officers some time. So I think that actually is good, appropriate use of a tool like a baton. Though, like we said earlier, if I think the guy has a shiv in his hand or a knife or something like that, I'd rather not fight him with my baton. Now, these guys that showed up were they were the security to that halfway house, and our officer now draws his firearm. So at some point, Mike, he decides, nah, this guy's not just an unarmed dude who's charging at me. He now has got something in his hand that he wants to fight me with, and so the firearm comes out. And I think that was probably a good choice at this point, with a guy who is charging an officer armed with a baton and screaming at him and doing God knows what.
Yeah, tough to say what he saw or what he perceived at this moment. I do want to say the security guards could not be any more nonchalant about this if they tried. They walked over like they were, going to take a pee break or something. So I'm not sure what that was about. I would
it's probably an everyday thing for them, right?
Yeah.
This is just like, oh, it's Tuesday. Look, it's Juan, you know, or whatever, and it is what it is.
But somebody actively assaulting a law enforcement officer shouldn't. I mean, even if it is an everyday thing, it's just as serious today as it was yesterday or last Wednesday.
Absolutely, I agree.
We were backing up in a straight line. We talk about this all the time. Backing up in a straight line is not a strategy that's going to get any success. You need to offline or strafe or however you want to put it to try to get the person to either olay and run by you like a bullfighter or whatever. But this guy's just all over the map. There's no telling what he's going to do next. Here he just walks away again. And there he is calling it in, which I said earlier, something we should have done from the beginning, but whatever. And he comes back one more time. We talk about closing that door on the cruiser. That's so important. Again, we talk about that a bunch of times where somebody ended up in a shooting that wasn't really all that justified because someone jumped in their police car because they left it unsecured. So secure that car, lock the door. You should be able to leave it on and lock the door with a clicker or a key on your belt or something like that, because the last thing you want is this guy stealing your car, not only for the public safety aspect, but just trying to live that down in the locker room with your fellow officers that your car got stolen is not a good day. It's not a good look. It's nothing you want to have to deal with.
Well, and in this case, the officer leaving his car door open precipitated him having to try to vector towards this guy and stop him from getting in the cruiser. That closed the distance between them and eliminated the officer's discretionary time. And because he didn't, then the guy charges him with an implement in his hand, no discretionary time left, he ends up having to shoot him. And I think he did have to shoot him in the moment, but had he closed and locked his door, he might have been able to let that guy run that way, like, you ain't gonna get in my car anyways, bro, it's locked, and not had to do that. So a little bit of proper prior planning might prevent you from having to use a higher level of force later. Again, not gonna give him too much crap for that. I get it, it's a high stress environment, but this is why your standard procedures say, when you get out of the car, if it's not an utter emergency in that second, lock that car down. So dude decides then to charge, and again, all the discretionary time is gone. So now the officer backing straight up, this is the fruit of backing straight up, is that you can't possibly run faster backwards than the dude who is running forwards can run. And I know some people are gonna make comments that that's probably because this officer has a few extra pounds on him or whatever. Honestly, unless you're an NFL caliber cornerback, you ain't backing up and keeping up with somebody that's running, and you're gonna end up on your butt, which is why we suggest lateral or diagonal movement.
Let's talk for a second again about the security officers here, John. I've worked with and interacted with very professional security officers in the past. You know, not all trained the same way, but if these guys are going to walk over and insert themselves into the situation, try to be a little bit more useful. I don't like that they just sort of stood by and watched all this going on. Now, finally, now at this point, they appear to be moving in. But if you're not going to help, if you're not going to attempt to assist the officer in a real physical, tangible way, stay where you were. If you're not actually going to do something useful, don't walk over there and then expect your presence to somehow change anything. This guy is not impressed by the security guards, not impressed by the cops. He's not intimidated by any of this. So, I'm glad they finally did something, but this is a little late in the game as the officer's already on his keister.
Yeah, and look, I think this is where he got the hit. I think he shot twice, and the first shot missed, and then the second shot, as he is on his back and rolling away, he finally got a hit in the leg, and a leg shot was acceptable in this particular case. This is one of the reasons that we do talk about shooting from compromised positions and from odd positions and from grounded positions, particularly and especially for law enforcement officers. Officers, hear me. You want to get good in your standing shooting first. We see far more of that in real life encounters than anything else. But having a little experience that you know how to shoot from your back, know how to shoot from odd positions, know how to shoot while you're diminished, can help you when you see this, that it's not the first time you've ever experienced seeing your sight and pressing your trigger in a real life encounter.
We called it down and disable drills, but we did it at least once a year. It's something that you just have to practice it a little bit. You have to have shot from an off angle before it. If you've only ever shot from a standing position, squared off against a paper target, you're doing yourself a disservice. Look into your agency's policy, see if there is some way that you could practice this stuff at the range with live fire. Not the least of which issue is not shooting yourself in the foot or the leg in the process of shooting from a down and disabled position. But he ended up on his back. He got a shot off on the guy. This whole thing could have been avoided by just calling in the cavalry and not inserting yourself in the situation in the first place. But at the end of the day, he did what he had to do to cover his ass.